Corporate Governance Platform, a program from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, is now at your doorstep.
By the way, what is corporate governance and what are its key pillars?
Will there be any conflict of interest if our person combines the roles of our chairman and a chief executive officer in a corporate organization?
What can Nigeria do to gain international recognition in the context of the application of corporate governance?
These and many more questions will be answered on
Corporate Governance Platform, a program designed to inform and educate our numerous viewers on the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities.
Join the Corporate Governance Platform crew every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. on MITV, your talent station, via DSTV 255 and UHF 43.
Corporate Governance Platform, your strategy for the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities. Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.
Many thanks for joining us on your favorite program, Corporate Governance Platform, coming to you from MITV in Lagos. And in today's episode, we are going to take a look at corporate governance and leadership in crisis situation. And my guest today is not new to the show. He's been here once, and this is the second time we are hosting him on this show. He's Mr. David OLATUNJI. Mr. David OLATUNJI is an extraordinary trainer, teacher, speaker, and a corporate governance expert. He has communicated his thoughts to corporate leaders across industries and private sectors of the economy. He is well known for his practical, insightful, real-world perspectives on learning. His experience in education and knowledge impartation spanned over 20 years in the banking, manufacturing, insurance, educational, communications, media, and the imaging sectors of the economy. He has received intense training both locally and abroad across Belgium, Germany, and the United Kingdom. He was a faculty member of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, where he taught professional administration, corporate administration, strategic and operations management, and corporate governance from the year 1997 to the year 2005. Mr. OLATUNJI was a council member of ICSAN between 1997 and 2004, and he authored the Corporate Governance Study Textbook for the Institute. He is presently the CEO of David OLATUNJI Leadership Academy, popularly known as DOLA, a learning hub for incubating leaders in good governance and authentic leadership. He is involved in international financial reporting standards, training, and consulting. Mr. OLATUNJI, once again, you are welcome to Corporate Governance Platform.
Thank you very much for bringing me. It's always a pleasure to come here to discuss corporate governance.
And thank you for honoring our invitation. Okay, let's go straight to the point. Today we are discussing something very important, corporate governance and leadership in crisis situation. Yeah. And I would like to start by asking you to briefly explain the terms leadership, corporate governance, and crisis in corporate context.
Thank you very much. Leadership is the ability to motivate and to influence people towards the realization of the organization's vision, mission, goals, and objectives. But these people, in this context now, will be referred to as the stakeholders of the organization. So leadership in the context we are using it this evening is the influence that you can wield on stakeholders to move them into the future of the organization to realize its objectives and goals as you sustainably manage the organization into the future.
Okay.
Right? So that is leadership. And the key element of leadership that I've just mentioned is influence. And the key element in influence is trust. When people trust you, you influence them. When you can influence them, then you can lead them. Now, when you're talking about corporate governance, the first definition actually popularly accepted was given by Sir Adrian Cadbury Committee in 1992 as a system, rule, policies, procedures by which organizations are directed and controlled. OECD, Organization Economic Cooperation Development, says that corporate governance is, is ability to define a set of relationships that exist between the shareholders, the management, and the employees. Right? Okay. So it's a set of relationships. How do we manage this set of relationships that must be in existence in an organization for the organization to realize its objectives? David Olatunji's definition of corporate governance is the way and manner that the leadership of an organization can align as closely as possible the different interests of all stakeholders. You see, in an organization, you have at least a minimum of 9 stakeholders, and they all have conflicting interests, different interests. The interest of the shareholders is not the interest of the board. The interest of the board is not that of the management. That of management is not that of the creditor. The interest of the board is not the interest of the government that is looking for your taxes. So how do you now align all those different conflicting interests as closely as possible so that the organization can be sustainably managed into the future? And when you're talking about crisis, you're talking about, an interruption that comes to a business that needs a change, right? Crisis usually refers to, what comes against the business operations of an organization that puts it to risk, that jeopardizes existence. Maybe through unintended consequences, maybe through risk management problems, and there are characteristics of crisis. Number one, it is unexpected. It has come like COVID-19 last year came unexpectedly, and it affected, global businesses. It affected, events. It affected, the traveling. It affected event center. Almost all businesses were affected because there was an interruption. So it usually comes unexpected. Then 2, it creates uncertainty. Do you understand? And 3, it could jeopardize the goals of an organization. Therefore, 4, there must be a change. So when you look at the 3 together, leadership is the ability to respond, to changes that could create crisis in an organization. And let me just conclude this. Corporate governance is the strategic response of an organization to strategic risk created by crisis.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. That was comprehensive enough. I think we need to go for a short break. And when we come back, we'll continue the discussion with Mr. David Olatunji. Please don't go away.
Corporate Governance Platform, a program from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, is now at your doorstep.
By the way, what is corporate governance and what are its key pillars?
Will there be any conflict of interest if a person combines the roles of a chairman and a chief executive officer in a corporate organization?
What can Nigeria do to get international recognition in the context of the application of corporate governance?
These and many more questions will be answered on
Corporate Governance Platform, a program designed to inform and educate our numerous viewers on the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities.
Join the Corporate Governance Platform crew every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. on MITV, your talent station, via DSTV 255 and UHF 43.
Corporate Governance Platform, your strategy for the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities. Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.
Corporate Governance Platform, a program from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, is now at your doorstep.
By the way, what is corporate governance and what are its key pillars?
Will there be any conflict of interest if a person combines the roles of a chairman and a chief executive officer in a corporate organization?
What can Nigeria do to get international recognition in the context of the application of corporate governance?
These and many more questions will be answered on
Corporate Governance Platform, a program designed to inform and educate our numerous viewers on the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities.
Join the Corporate Governance Platform crew every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. on MITV, your talent station, via DSTV 255 and UHF 43.
Corporate Governance Platform, your strategy for the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities. Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.
You're welcome back. It's still Corporate Governance Platform, and we are discussing corporate governance and leadership in crisis situation. I still have Mr. OLATUNJI with me here in the studio, leading in the conversation of this particular important topic. Mr. OLATUNJI, you've been able to explain vividly what corporate governance, leadership, and crisis is all about.
Yes.
But I want to ask, what's the connection between corporate governance and the concept of leadership?
Well, everything rises and falls with leadership in an organization. And when I'm talking about leadership, I'm referring to the board of directors. Corporate governance can never be effective without the willingness on the part of leadership to make it effective. And that is why it is the leadership that is willing and that has accepted and adopted corporate governance principles that could actually incorporate it as a corporate strategy to move the organization towards adopting those principles. Do you understand that make for corporate governance? So leadership is extremely very important. Go and look at all the corporate failures all over the world. The reason why organizations fail is leadership that is paying lip service, to corporate governance principles. In 2008, 2007, 2008 in Nigeria, there were the corporate failures of banks. And you realize that it was as a result of leadership failure that corporate governance failed. And that is the reason why the organization eventually collapsed and got to its ruins.
So in essence, leadership has to drive corporate governance.
Leadership is the driver of corporate governance. Of course, leadership is the driver of the organization. I mentioned in my last show here that after putting together a study text on corporate governance, I came to the conclusion that if anyone asks me what is the synonym for corporate governance, I'll be very quick to say board governance. Corporate governance is about almost 85% board governance.
Okay, what then will you say is the relationship between leadership and the concept of responsibility?
Wow, responsibility is a two-word compounded. Responsibility. So responsibility is actually ability of leadership to respond, to the demands of the office, to the demands of the seat it's occupying, right? So responsibility is the shareholders have given you authority and you have owned the authority. Now you have to rise up and use that authority to carry out the duty that is demanded from that authority, from the use of that authority. So ability to respond to the demands of your office, ability to respond to risk that comes against the organization in this context is responsibility. And that is why it goes also with accountability, because those that have put you in a responsible position has the authority to ask you to explain how you have used the authority, how you have carried out decisions based on the authority that they have accorded you as the leaders of the organization.
Okay, what then are the qualities of good leadership, in your opinion?
In this context, there are about, 6 I will quickly mention. Number one, vision. Effective leaders, they see far beyond what other stakeholders can see. You see farther. That is sight. That is vision. Then courage. You see boldness, ability to carry out firm decisions without any fear, without any anxiety, without thinking whether somebody's ox is God or so. A leader has a combination of both lion qualities and a lamb quality. So courage is extremely very important. Then commitment to goals of the organization, commitment, to the objectives of the organization, ability to commit resources towards the realization of organizational goals and objectives. Then energy. A leadership must have energy. A good leader must extremely have, must be energetic. If you have a sick leader or a weak leader, it's a liability to that organization. Wow. Then leadership is service. You serve. rather than to be served. If a leader is in office and you think that it is about you being served, then you are not really a leader. Leadership is problem solving. So leadership is solution, right? Then leadership is results. You see, it doesn't matter what they call you in an organization. It's not what is on your lapel. It is not what is on your door. It is not what they call you. It's about results that you get. When you see effective leadership, that organization can never have lingering problems. So results is one of the attributes of leadership. Then finally, sacrifice. You see, a good attribute of effective leadership is sacrifice. A leader sacrifices time, a leader sacrifices money, a leader sacrifices talent, sacrifices everything for the movement of the organization he leads.
Okay, if these are the attributes of good leadership, what then are the benefits accruable to organizations that adhere to the principles of corporate governance?
Wow, that's huge. You know, the first thing is this. Once you have good corporate governance in practice globally, McKinsey, carried out a research that organizations who have corporate governance principles in place, that they have a plethora of benefits to it. One, they'll be able to avoid corporate scandals. They'll be able to avoid risks that bring organizations down. Then when you have good corporate governance practice in place, then you will be able to strengthen your decision-making ability. The decision-making ability of the board in deliberations, in decisions-making and all that is strengthened with good corporate governance principles. You see, because you bring the principles in place and you will avoid unethical practices usually that will bring organizations down. Then we have also found out that it actually attracts stakeholders to you. When stakeholders, especially in the Western world, when stakeholders realize that you have good corporate governance principles in place, then all stakeholders are attracted. Customers are more attracted to you in socially responsible investments. Clients are more, they warm up to organizations that are socially responsible, that are good corporate citizens. Do you understand? They have low cost of capital, low cost of running the business. They have all sorts of opportunities that other organizations don't have, even though many don't think so. Many think that the more you have corporate governance principles, the more costly, the more expenses you incur in running the business. But no, it's not so. Corporate governance principles will make organizations avoid all those unethical issues that organizations today are suffering under.
Wonderful, wonderful. In essence, they have volumes of benefits.
Is a truckload. It's actually a subject in itself.
Okay.
It's a subject in itself.
I want to talk about corporate governance. Now I'm talking about the codes of corporate governance in Nigeria. The chairman and the managing director are two leaders in corporate realm. Why do you think the codes of corporate governance world over always stipulate that the functions of these two office holders be separated?
In 1992, when Sir Adrian Cadbury Committee was put together by the Financial Reporting Council, UK, to look into the issue of corporate failures, right? Because at that time, so many organizations have failed. Mirror Group has failed. Polypec has failed. BCCI of London, and so on and so forth. So the guy and the committee members began to look into that issue. And when they got to many organizations, then they realized that the leaders of those organizations were astute. They were guys who had gone to Harvard, they were guys that had gone to Yale, Oxford University. So they wonder why the corporate failures, despite, the pedigree of these leaders. Right, so Sir Adrian Cadbury now began to look into the issue of board structure. So he now realized that one major problem was board structure imbalance. Board structure imbalance means the ratio between non-executive directors and executive directors, do you understand, is warped, or or the ratio between non-executive directors and independent, not executive directors also is warped. So he now realized one key issue, that especially in Mirror Group, that the chairman was also the CEO, meaning there was a concentration of power on just one individual. Do you understand? And that made that individual a dominant personality. You know, Robert Maxwell was the chairman, was the CEO of Maxwell Corporation. That includes Mirror Group newspapers. And Asinada was the chairman, the CEO of Polypec. Asinada was from Cyprus then, and he was always taking decisions alone. And these decisions were jeopardizing the interests of the organization. But usually chairman cum CEO don't mind, because now everybody will have to just defer to them, because the power is concentrated on them. And that's why in Nigeria, the sectoral codes, PENCOM, NICOM, CBN code, and the unified code, the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance 2018, they have suggested that there must be a separation between the chairman and the CEO. The chairman should necessarily be a non-executive director, while the CEO, of course, has executive responsibilities. So there must always be a separation in order to make sure that there is a counterbalance, you know, against the excesses of the CEO. Once the CEO wants to misbehave, there must be somebody to check him. But once you have the chairman, it's also the CEO. So the CEO wants to the chairman wants to query the CEO. Do you understand? And the CEO is responding to the chairman's, you know, query. And you now realize that it's just the same person. And that thing also happened in Nigeria, you know, when Lit Shigiwa was almost the chairman, the CEO, the CFO, everything of Unilever then. And you realize, right? Yes, Rufus Giwa, and you realize that because of that, it was only what is said at the board that all other board members were accustomed to obey. And that is not the real reason for the non-executive director's inclusion in board deliberations. They are to bring independence and objectivity into the deliberations of the board. But once you have the chairman CEO, you can't achieve that.
Okay, we are discussing crisis situation.
Yes.
You've already said that crisis situation is an emergency situation.
Yes.
Will you subscribe to the view that the functions of the managing director and the chairman now be fused in terms of crisis and as an exception to the general rule?
Of course, yes, I support that, you know, because we have actually seen, you know, examples like that before. For instance, in 2000, you know, Van de Weef of Marks and Spencer, you know, emerged as the CEO and the chairman, you know, of Marks and Spencer then, because the organization was going through a crisis, going through a financial crisis. But I want to quickly just say this. For me to support that the chairman and the managing director should be fusing on one individual, right, in times of crisis, number one, they must seek, you know, the approval of the shareholders. The shareholders must be informed about it, you know, and it must be temporary. It must not be something that will last for forever. As long or as soon as the company is out of the crisis, then the chairman CEO must be split again. So I actually support it if those conditions can be met.
Okay, I'd like to ask you two questions that I want you to answer briefly.
Okay.
The first one is that what's the relationship between propagation of ethics and leadership? And how do you think adherence to ethics promotes corporate governance culture?
You know, in my study of corporate governance, I have arrived at 21 reasons for corporate failures. You know, very key out of those reasons, very cardinal out of those reasons is unethical practices, unethical board, unethical suppliers, unethical employees, unethical management, unethical tax collectors. Those are all the things that have, you know, combined together that have brought organizations to ruins, especially unethical conduct. And that is the reason why the board must come together and actually create, you know, a code of business conduct and ethics. Do you understand? It's not just that they create it, they have to create it and monitor it and ensure that it works. In it is actually whistleblowing, you know, and there must always be what is it that we hold as values here, because ethics actually refer to the codes or the rules of behavior that we have to imbibe, that we have to put in place before we make decisions, before we take actions concerning this organization. These are values, these are rules, these are codes that is guiding our behavior. And this must be embedded in the very corporate strategy of the organization. It must be part of the culture. It must not just be something that is done peripherally. It must be something that is incorporated into the culture of the organization. And that said, you must have professional ethics, for lawyers, for accountants, do you understand, for charter secretaries. There are ethics that must guide them. Then you must have personal ethics. Then you must have corporate ethics. Corporate ethics like prohibition of bribery. Do you understand? In this organization, we are not giving anybody bribe, and we are not taking bribes to, the use of child labor. Boohoo in UK right now is a fashion firm, is currently having crisis because they were taking, their raw materials from an organization that was not paying, the minimum wage. Do you understand? And so all those things are part of ethics. So organizations must propagate ethics in order to guide the decision-making process of the stakeholders.
Wonderful. Organizations must propagate ethics in order to guide the decision-making process of
stakeholders.
On this note, we would like to draw the curtain and wrap it up. Mr. Olatunji, we want to thank you very much for your contribution to today's discussion.
Thank you very much.
And of course, when we invite you again, you will join us.
I will be here.
Okay.
By God's
Thank you
grace.
very much, viewers, for joining us on the program today. And we'd like to invite you to join us again next week, same time, same station. I remain Tunde Adeyemi. Bye for now.
Corporate Governance Platform, a program from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, is now at your doorstep.
By the way, what is corporate governance and what are its key pillars?
Would there be any conflict of interest if our person combines the roles of our chairman and a chief executive officer in a corporate organization?
What can Nigeria do to gain international recognition in the context of the application of corporate governance?
These and many more questions will be answered on
Corporate Governance Platform, a program designed to inform and educate our numerous viewers on the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities.
Join the Corporate Governance Platform crew every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. on MITV, your talent station via DSTV 255 and UHF 43.
Corporate